Welcome to Behind the Badge with your special guest, Lieutenant Williams, your news source for all things police in the city of Fond du Lac.
Welcome back into Fond du Lac today on News Talk 1450 and 100.7 KFIZ. It's now time for another edition of Behind the Badge. Officer Clapper flying solo this week. Good morning, Officer Clapper. How's it going today?
Good morning. It would be better if Lieutenant Williams would have taken vacation and would have been here with me, but he's a busy guy, so we'll give him the benefit of the doubt and grant him that he's not here this week. So
vacations, right? He's probably getting ready for his kiddos to go back to school, trying to get as much time with them as possible. Let's talk about vacation for officers. A starting out officer, obviously Lieutenant Williams has been around for a while, so he probably gets more days than everybody else. But when someone starts out, how many days do they get?
Sure. So their first, up until 7 years, you get 2 weeks of vacation, and then four floating holidays, which are a little different.
Mm-hmm.
You can't put them in like advanced. So when every year around November, I want to say, shift picks and vacation picks start. So the shift picks go by seniority.
Mm-hmm.
Same with vacation picks. So they start at the most senior patrolman from there and work their way down to the newest officer. So you get to pick what shift you want to go to. For now, we have 3 shifts. Might be switching that up. I don't know, for next year. And then you'll get vacation picks, and then the most senior officer on each shift starts with the vacation picks. It usually comes in a folder,
Mm-hmm.
and they go down the line and figure out, maybe you can only take 1 full week at a time.
Okay.
Initially.
You got to give some of those newer guys an opportunity to get the days they might want, right?
Exactly. So you start at the top and say like, hey, maybe I want this week, and you put it in for that week, and we can only have 1 person off at a time per shift. So it's a different way of doing it rather than I'm sure most places, but it's the way that we have things worked out with seniority and trying to balance it between, maybe the most senior guy and
Right.
the least senior guy, giving everybody the opportunity to get off.
Where are you at on that ladder? You've been there like 7 years or something like that? Is that correct?
For a little over 4 years.
4 years? Okay.
Yep. On my shift, I think I'm 4th or 5th. So I'm middle of the pack.
Gotcha.
But overall, for where I'm at, I probably have around 20 people below me in seniority, which is actually pretty good for being about 4.5 years. So.
Gotcha. We got Officer Clapper in the studio this morning on Behind the Badge. Lieutenant Williams, too busy with vacation time. Good for him, I guess. As we look ahead, we're less than 2 weeks from students being back in the classroom. I don't think you have any kiddos running around at your household, so you're not necessarily dealing with this yet. I'm not either, but a lot of people, this is a crazy time of the year.
Yeah, and now is crunch time for parents, not us, but crunch time for parents to get their kids back together and things ready for school. So, like school supplies, clothes, all that jazz, but it's also kind of a busy time for us. Our school resource officers are preparing for school again, and our patrol officers are preparing because, as you may know, if you have children, our patrol officers are very visible around schools.
Mm-hmm.
For the safety of the children. So it's really important for us to be out there and visible around the time that school starts and gets out, especially in the beginning of the year.
Like you said, right, you see more traffic probably that 7 to 8 o'clock hour, and maybe that 3 o'clock to 4 o'clock hour. There's going to be more people driving around a central location, or I guess in Fond du Lac, you have a lot of different schools, so maybe it's not even all centralized.
Yeah, and if you haven't noticed this, actually, during the school year, the traffic is horrible, especially in the morning between like 7:30, 8 o'clock. It's actually quite crazy to drive down some of these main streets, and there's cars everywhere because you got people going to regular schools and dropping their kids off, stuff like that, and then colleges and work on top of that. So that is a big thing that we see, and there's actually usually an influx of traffic crashes because there's just more traffic on the road. But also around the schools, especially like some of the schools that are not in the greatest area for a school, like Chegwin, for an example, where it's in the middle of a neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
So it's hard for people to come up with some sort of a routine where to pick up and drop off their kids because there's really not a lot of parking or places. So that's where we run into issues with like people parking in no parking zones, which really isn't that big of a deal in all honesty. But when you consider you're going to be putting cars on both sides of the street and kids running out between cars. Those school safety parking zones are there for safety of the children, because you have these young kids running out. They don't know better whether or not to look for cars, and I would hate for one of them to run out because you can't see them and get hit by a car. So that's something to consider as well. The school safety zones are there for a reason. They're there for the safety of our children. So please keep that in mind and try not to park in that area. We get that sometimes you just do a quick drop off or pick up and stuff like that, but our community service officers are pretty big into enforcing parking violations of the school safety zones. So it's something to keep in mind.
Now, you also mentioned resource officers earlier on, right? These are officers that hang out at the school and they're there to help out if anything happens, right?
Yep. So throughout the summer, a lot of people question, this is going to be kind of a question of the week that I'm coming up with on my own right here. So
it might be the question that I was just thinking in my head. Is it like, what do these resource officers do during the summer?
Sure. So that's exactly what I was going to talk about. So
none of this was planned, I swear.
Our school resource officers, we have 5, 2 at the high school and 1 at each middle school. They, during summer, have a caseload from the detective bureau. So it's usually stuff involving kids, so like sexual assaults involving children, I should say, child abuse complaints, stuff like that. But they also get some minor detective cases as well to investigate throughout the summer. But then they also have the youth advocacy program, where it's in correlation with the Department of Social Services, where there's children that may be lacking some support at home or maybe going through a little bit of a tough stretch, where the school resource officers are able to build relationships with them by doing different things. So if you follow our Facebook page, you may have saw they just went fishing for cops and bobbers, and then they do all sorts of different events, from going to different like farms, stuff like that, to go-karts, rollerblading, stuff like that. So it's a good way for our SROs to build relationships with the kids that are in their schools, but also for us to be able to give back to our community. So over the summer, our SROs stay very busy. Some agencies do it differently, like the Sheriff's Office, for an example. Their school resource deputies actually work patrol during the summer, or they work court security or building security. So it's a little bit different, but it's unique per agency. I don't really know, other than our agency in the county, how things work. But during the school year, obviously school resource officers' priority is safety with our children, and we've seen a lot of unfortunate tragic events in the recent past with school shootings and stuff like that. So safety is really imperative with our children, but also trying to be a positive role model to these kids, building relationships with them, letting them know that police aren't bad, and just helping mentor them throughout their journey of the schools, but also there to, if there's an issue, to kind of nip it in the bud before it becomes a bigger issue. So.
And you mentioned, the resource officers right here. So they don't work, first shift, second shift, third shift. Their shift is at the school during the entire time school's in session, correct?
Yep. So what it is, it's a specialist position. So you have to apply for it and interview with the school district, and also with our police department reps. So there would be representatives from the school district and the police department in on your interviews. And then you get into that position for 5 years. So it's a little bit of a pay increase, not significantly more, but your schedule is basically the school schedule. So when teachers are working, you're working, and then you get off your typical like summer breaks, stuff like that, like spring break. I mean, that's summer break.
We already talked about what they do over the summer.
Christmas break, stuff like that. So it's actually partially funded by the school district. So that's how they get the choice on who comes into their schools and stuff like that. So it's a great program that we have as many school resource officers at our schools as we do to help keep our children safe.
You mentioned there's currently 5 in Fond. Like, is this something that a lot of officers want to be a part of? Is this something where there's always more officers wanting to do it than there are spots?
Yes and no. I think recently our department became very young. So it used to be a trend where there's people putting in for it and everybody wants to be an SRO, but I think that our department is so young that there's actually a years of service limit, or
Okay.
not limit, but expectation that you have to have before you put into this position. So you have to have at least 2 years of service, and majority of our night shift has got probably less than 2 years of
Okay.
service. So they're really young, and I think that's kind of a disadvantage as well. And then there's the people on day shift that are getting close to retirement, and that's what they're envisioning. So they're getting close, and um, there wasn't a lot of interest recently, but I think that once these newer officers get a little more experience and do their time on patrol, I think that there'll be more interest in the future as well. So I guess we'll see what time says when it gets to that point.
And it's probably one of those positions too, right? You mentioned a lot of younger people on the force. As you get older, you start having a family. Knowing that set schedule to when your kids are in school, you're working. When they're not in school, you'd be able to be home with them. Is probably, you know, another one of those things that would be a plus for the position.
Absolutely, and working, necessarily, let's just say me for an example, if I were to go into the schools,
Is that something you want to do eventually?
yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. It's something I'm passionate about. But let's just say I were to go into the schools, and right now, I mean, I probably could go to day shift with where I'm at. I actually turned it down this year, but for some reason, let's just say I'm a younger officer, got about 2 years on, and there's no future of day shift in sight. And I got family at home, and I want to get to day shift, and if I'm passionate about it and do well in the process and get it, that's a way for you to have a better schedule. So that is a benefit of it as well. That's the unfortunate part of law enforcement and shift style work.
Mhm.
So, whether it's healthcare, law enforcement, fire, EMS, stuff like that, you're always going to be working nights or weekends, holidays, and stuff like that. And once you start to have a family, it takes a toll on your family because you're not there. You're missing the kids' sporting events or missing birthday parties, stuff like that. So that'd be a benefit of somebody going into that position. So.
We're less than 2 weeks back to school in Fond du Lac. We got Officer Clapper in the studios this morning for Behind the Badge. Appreciate him stopping by every single Friday, even if Lieutenant Williams cannot make it. Thanks for stopping by today. Anything else you want to hit on before I let you get out of here?
Hopefully Lieutenant Williams will be back here soon, but I think for our next session I may be on vacation, if I recall. Actually, probably 2 sessions from now, so I may not be here, so I guess we can't razz Lieutenant Williams too much.
Gotcha. Thanks for stopping by. This is KFIZ.